link again.
So I'll look to the audience and migrate anybody over if they are in fact in the audience.
Okay.
So we're live. Not seeing any attendees popping in yet, but I'll keep an eye on that.
All right. That's kind of interesting. Where is everybody? Well, if nobody's coming, this will be a super short meeting.
Well, we know Brett and Molly were planning on coming. We
I
talked
know.
about it yesterday.
Well, there's John Eric.
I just promoted Brett.
A few of us. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. How are you, John Eric?
Good. Today's the meeting day.
Is that
12:30, just got out of it. It's for our water supply. A lot of F-bombs thrown around.
oh no.
Disagreement over how much protection that we should plan for.
You talking about the dam?
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
We got a water commission meeting at 4. We have a workshop to deal with how to handle planning for our water supply with all this from the time bond report at 5 to 6:30. The water commission is going to hold them until we don't need to hold them anymore. I'm guessing maybe a few meetings. A lot to do. I'll do my best to give you guys accurate updates. That'll go from there.
Okay.
But I need this group to keep pushing.
Good to hear. Why don't we give folks just one more minute and then we'll get started. Because I know we're missing a few people that said they were going to be able to be here.
Did everyone review the meeting minutes? I didn't review them yet.
I know Sarah and I did.
Who
I looked at last month's.
Sarah wrote them, right?
Yeah.
She did an awesome job the first time.
Thank
So
you.
assuming that she continued with doing a good job, maybe I don't have to review it.
You're supposed to read them to remember what we talked about a month later.
You know what I really love about Sarah's notes, and yeah, because everyone's super busy. I understand if you don't read it word for word, and that's not what I'm looking for. But I thought I would start having us review them, especially because she's so good at pulling out actions, or responsibilities that we've said we would do. And so, I think it'd be great to get them out a little bit beforehand, more so than I did this time, just so we can review. And it had helped me. I was like, oh my gosh, I said I was going to talk to Molly, and I didn't. And so I have. And I don't know if I would have remembered to do that if I hadn't looked at the minutes. So I think that's my purpose in having us take a look at minutes, not necessarily as formally as you would have to in some other commissions, but for our purposes, it's more of a reminder.
On that thought process, do you mind putting it on the screen so we go through it as you see fit to go through things to do?
I can do that. Yeah, why don't we I don't want to spend too much time on it, but how do others feel in terms of that? Does anyone object to spending a couple minutes on that, because we do have some other stuff to get into. What do you think?
Here with me.
No objection.
No objection.
there.
Patience. I always feel like a dinosaur when I'm doing this, trying to find the right thing. So I have too many monitors. Okay, can you all see this?
Yep.
And does it move when I move it?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So this is September's. Let's go through to about the hazard mitigation plan. Andy and John Eric, you've circled back with Julia, and we have, yeah, we'll get to this later, but yeah, I think we're on top of that one, so that one's all set. Brochure, Julia updated us. We were talking about quite a few things. We're updating membership updates.
That's pretty
Priorities.
fast. Yep, you're doing, that's good. That's nice and fast.
Does that look too bad? I'm just looking for action plans, but if we want to read it word for word, we can.
No, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
We did talk to the mayor. I did talk to the mayor with Molly about budget. We addressed that. Yeah, but this is 2 months ago, so we're really repeating stuff. So that's why I'm sort of flying through it. Yeah, we're talking about the website again today. This was a big meeting. Yeah, and we've started our subcommittees. So according to this, I think we were in pretty good shape from September to now.
Yeah, and I submitted all that grant stuff. So yeah, this looks good. I mean,
anybody, any comments, questions, concerns on that one? Silence. All right, October. We had our updates. Oh, a lot has happened since on Plum Island since we last met. Pretty good thorough update on the bulkhead, Andy and Jordy. Yeah, we set up our regulations working group and have met since then. The resource list. I'm going to address this a little bit more on today, the projects list in a little bit different angle. So we're circling back on that one. For sure, website, Brett's talking about that today. Budget, we're tabling that for now. Yep, and the regs working group.
sounds good.
Good?
Thanks for doing that. I'm satisfied.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm stopping now. Here we are. Does anyone want the agenda up or would we rather look at the screen? All right, let's just go then.
Jane,
Okay.
one question. How much time are we going to spend today?
I'm hoping to get through this by 4.
Good, thank you.
So I have a few updates, and then I know we heard from Jordy this morning. I don't know if everyone has had a chance to even check their email. You have in your inbox an update from Jordy on the bulkhead. And so I think unless anyone has questions, concerns right now, please read that. It's a really thorough update, and either contact me and I'll get some answers if you have any questions or concerns. Or John Eric, I know that you talked with us about this last time as well. So if you have anything off the top of your head.
I didn't read it, but if anyone, did you read it, Jane?
I did.
So essentially he says that, because he stopped by and gave me an update. My understanding is that the bulkhead engineer is going to raise the height of the cap a few feet to satisfy this committee, and they'll put it out to bid that way. Is that correct?
Yes.
That was my interpretation, yes. So they're raising it to the top of the missing the word, but yeah,
The
There's a
benches.
rail.
yes, the top of the benches.
It's
So
top of the benches, yeah. And it'll go out to bid that way.
Okay. So it is going out to bid that way. It's not that two-part.
Yeah, correct. And we had agreed, again, certainly the city could be back in discussion later on if there's, for some odd reason, funding enough for the original scope, but not enough for the raised height. I doubt that that will be the case, but the full plan is to bring it up to the height of the bench, you know, at this point. So that's the plan.
All righty. Andy, do you want to touch on the MVP project report? I know there's not a whole lot, but
yeah, and I apologize. I'm actually out of the office this week, so I haven't seen any emails the last couple of days. But we had reached out to Newbury just to ask where they were with the report that they had prepared for sea level rise and its impact on Plum Island. So we'd asked for an update on that. One thing that I had mentioned before that I think we need to do, irrespective of the continued issues we have with erosion on the island, is trying to make sure that the city plans ahead for their roadway access to the island, even decades into the future when scientists are predicting essentially that the roadway would be inundated twice daily. I think we need to start planning ahead for and taking a little further than what Worsley Whidden had done there to see how we can put together design plans for that, figure out how much it would cost to actually do it, because they just did a back of the napkin without any real engineering work, and then trying to figure out where the funding would come from to do that, and obviously the permits that would be needed. But it seems apparent that, you know, even aside from individual properties, if we lose the access to the island or have that frequently inundated, that's an issue. So our hope is that following that report from Newbury, that we would continue to work with them on that particular issue.
yeah, and the issue is we haven't seen it, right?
That's correct.
The
Yeah.
current issue is, the final draft was supposed to have been done sometime in July. I reached out to John O'Connell from Newbury as well, because he had been asking me about that, and I haven't heard back from him, but I was asking if he'd heard anything. So I know you're on top of that, you and Julia both, so hopefully we get that soon, or find out why we're not getting it at least. I think we all know a lot has happened, especially Reservation Terrace area. I'm moving on to the next update. Since we last met, Andy, could you or anyone else that's been involved update the group on the core bags or any?
Yeah, only because I haven't been out there the last couple of days. I'm wondering if Joe, having been at the commission meeting last night, might be the best person to speak to that now. Obviously, it's been a constantly changing design to try to address the continual erosion that's happening there. But the idea is to obviously protect the roadway, the homes and whatnot. But I think Joe could probably speak best of the current status.
Yeah, we approved the emergency cert last night. They put up a stone wall almost completely on city property. How far down? Just past the end of Reservation Terrace, I think, and in the area where there was so much erosion since the or during that last nor'easter, the elevation of the sand was too low to put core bags in there, and the DEP and DCR and CGM all signed off on putting the stones, which are essentially on the roadway and a bit beyond there. One interesting thing was that the state would not spend any money on the stones. They funded the core bags, but they did not put any money toward the stones and said they weren't going to do that. So they didn't want to set that precedent. What else? The core bags are enormous. Couple of commissioners went out there and took pictures. So they're pretty beefy bags that are mostly covered in sand now, in the excavated sand from that area. And I guess we'll see what happens. Because I think the any upcoming storms, the waves are going to come right up the beach, and they're going to probably break on the stone wall. So I don't know don't know how long that's going to last, how bad it'll get undermined and topple over, but that's where we are right now.
So the core bags are in, they're covered with sand, and the stone wall on city property has been constructed, or it was approved?
It's mostly, as of yesterday, it was mostly done.
Okay.
So
Who's paying for everything if it's not the state?
well, the state's paying for the core bag,
Right, I knew that. What about the
and the
rest?
city's paying for the stones, basically.
Do you know how much?
I'm not sure Anders, the GZA consultant, was positive. It's probably like 100 to 150,000, I think, for the stones, and like 350 for the core bag installation.
Joe, my understanding of GZA's design is that the core bags will prevent, water from going through the wall. So it's
No, the
good
core
for-
bags are not next to the wall.
They're on the ends.
They're on the ends. There's no.
Oh, okay. So that's actually worse than I thought. When we all, I'm stating the obvious for people that might not have thought of this level of detail. When there's a high tide, there's not wave action, but just simply a basic high tide. Riprap does not stop water from going. Riprap will not stop water from going through the voids of the rock. We all understand that. So I went to look at the GZA design. I went out there to look at it. Riprap alone will not keep the water out. But wasn't the intent to try to make it impervious, or no?
No. The intent was to knock down the waves.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I just heard that strictly from the mayor when the mayor said we need those to go up to stop the astronomical high tide. I didn't want to get into a discussion. It's not going to stop the astronomical high tide as far as water, but it will break the wave action. Okay.
It'll break the wave action and most likely prevent the road from getting further undermined, and the house that's right there on the corner of 73rd Street, north corner of 73rd Street. It seems to be on a slab, or
yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was undermined like 8 feet. When I went out there during the nor'easter, it was undermined a foot or two, but after that, apparently there was a lot more.
Are there, of course, there are next steps because this is going to be ongoing, but are there any immediate next steps, or is this pretty much what we're doing?
No, this is it until the dredging.
Jane, I might comment on that. Having spoken with Councillor Zeid and the mayor about it, and having visited the site, as John Eric says, the stone is going to absorb a lot of the energy that comes in with the wave action. But the core bags are intended to kind of seal the ends and hopefully slow down the amount of eroding sand that might undermine the stone between them. But the point that Councillor Zeid and I are making to the mayor is that, a couple of good coastal storms and a lot of the stone in particular, I'm not so worried about the core bags. They're quite impressive. But the stone might be undermined and moved, and we have to stockpile replacement stone if those homes are going to be protected. I can't say that the mayor agreed with us, but I think that's the direction that councillors are leaning toward, as frustrating and a stopgap, a measure as this is. I don't think anyone is pretending that this is the end. This is going to require maintenance, and we're going to have to stay on top of it until there's more sand pumped out of the dredging materials to slow down the erosion that's occurring behind Reservation Terrace. I might also report that the building inspector has been out to look at a couple of the homes that are being seriously undermined, and he's going to take the appropriate action that, in his judgment, is required by law if there are homes that are in imminent danger of collapse. So that's an unfortunate circumstance that we're in right now.
Yeah, what they said last night, at least what Anders said, is apparently the person whose home, their slab got undermined, apparently pumped sand back under there somehow. I'm not sure how they put it in there, but and I'm sure it's not really super stable anyways.
Yeah. Some of the houses are in a bad way.
All right, thank you. I'm wondering, and that it would be a great benefit to me, and I'm assuming other volunteers, if when anyone's going out there again, if it seems appropriate and it wouldn't be too much trouble, to give us a heads up, because I feel like, I've been walking out there, but not recently, but I would love to just get a better understanding of what's going on, just so of course, for this situation, but for situations down the road as well, just to get that experience. And we can talk about it a bit more when it comes to the purpose of these meetings as well. But I want to take a site visit or a field trip, and I can do that myself, but I think it would be more beneficial if I was out there with folks that have been more intimately involved. So if we keep that in mind, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go out there with me. They know who I am, and they're not very pleased with the commission. So.
Put a hat on. I understand, but but we can talk about it. We can figure that out.
Look,
that's top of my mind.
Some of those homeowners are truly terrified, and if your house was being undermined by a storm surge, you would be scared too. However you got there, and those anxieties are justified. But I'm going to express an opinion that seems inconsistent with my support for what the Concom usually does. I don't think we can just walk away in the short term. I think people there need some breathing room and the opportunity to plan what they want to do if their home is in such a precarious position, and if they feel threatened, we ought to at least give them the opportunity to think through the option that makes best sense for themselves.
Well, yeah, but one also needs to take into consideration when several of these homeowners bought their homes too, within the past year. So
I kind of discount that, Joe, because however they got there, they're there. That's in most cases the most or one of the most significant investments they make in their lifetime, and I don't think we can just walk away. So that's my piece, but we should sit down and talk about it.
No, I think we should sit down and talk about it, and I feel like a role for it's a little too big for this committee, but a role for us to push it and lead on is setting some kind of expectations in and there's so many ways to do that in regs. There's communication, education going forward, because right now we're in this situation. People are threatened. Some of it was for some of us feel more strongly than others. We might all feel very strongly that it was foreseeable, but we're here now. Yeah. What I'm concerned about is 5 years from now, are we still going to be saying, we're here now? And so, as we address this going forward, I think in any way that we can, setting expectations so that we do know how to react in the next emergency is important. So,
Jane,
okay.
do you think our group should make a hard stance formally, officially?
Honestly, right now, I don't think we're ready. But I think going forward, working with others, maybe, yeah. That's a really wishy-washy answer.
Yeah,
I don't want to answer yet because I don't know enough.
We could come up with some scenarios and then present it and decide which one's best.
Yeah.
Because it is a tough decision.
It is.
Just a quick question on the well, the work that was done, especially the hard surfaces. Did anyone do an erosion assessment
No.
on this? So, I mean, the problem with putting out hard surfaces typically out on beach side that way, unless the dredging happens soon, is that you actually exacerbate coastal erosion, particularly sand erosion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as long as people understand the risk of doing this, I mean, this is exactly what's happening all the way through. I mean, Hawaii is a good example. California is a good example. This is happening in North Carolina right now, where people are putting up these things to go ahead and protect areas and their hard surfaces, and essentially the beaches are all washing away. So I think we need to go ahead and just, whatever the solution is, this needs to be communicated to the owner somehow, that you do have partial protection of what's actually happening with the roads, but depending upon what the dredge schedule is and everything else like that, I mean, we get 2 or 3 more nor'easters before that work happens. So we're getting into a winter season right now. There's no guarantees that this is, and I think this is where John Eric was going at the beginning of this. There's no guarantees that this is going to work. And people out there need to understand that, because again, this goes back to the risk associated with it. I haven't gotten a chance. I was going to go out there last weekend and take a look at this, but I heard it from a number of people just how bad it actually is. But again, there's very little we can do right now. I think that needs to be communicated. They're not good, and you may have already done this, so I apologize. I know you know this, but it is one of these things that it may seem like it's a solution, but building those hard surfaces is not necessarily a solution for how to deal with sandbars. And
oh yeah, no, some of the pictures that folks showed at the meeting last night, you know, the tide was up to the bottom of the stone wall.
Yeah.
On Reservation Terrace. So I don't even know if that was a high tide. So it's basically the waves are going to come in, they're going to break on that wall. So there's going to be all sorts of undermining. Mm-hmm. I expect the wall to collapse forward, and I brought that up to them.
So has that been
it's still sitting on sand, so.
May I respond to what Rishi just said? And he's correct. And Joe, you're correct. But in my comment, and I can't speak for them. I should not speak for them, but in my assessment, in conversations with the residents out there, they're well aware of the limitations of a hard, stone placement out there, a barrier placement out there. They're also aware that 1 or 2 more astronomical tides, or particularly in combination with the coastal storm, some of those houses are going to be washed away without some sort of emergency protection. And I think that they're realistic about that. But I think the best thing that we can do is to give people on the island, and I'm speaking just for myself now, the opportunity to think through their options, give them a little more time. A crisis sharpens one's perception about what is possible and what is advisable. And we have to be respectful of the fact that they've placed themselves in a situation that perhaps didn't seem so hazardous at one time, but is terribly hazardous now. And as neighbors, help them to the extent that we can escape with their skins. It's a difficult situation. And I would encourage anyone to go out there and look at what's been done and see the imminent threat to some of those properties that are on Reservation Terrace. It's the erosion accelerated over the past several months at an alarming rate.
The only thing, the tough time that I have, Barry, is $150,000 of our money is going to protect 2 or 3 homes.
Right.
That's just not sustainable for us to go up and down the beach.
No.
And that's the reality. It's really hard to, I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I think, I don't know, you guys, I just think they need to, $150,000, we just spent it. Now we're going to do it again next month, and you're going to do it 6 months from now. I just have a tough time with it. I'm not afraid to say this is the point where we just can't, I don't know, we can't continue.
Yeah, John Eric, just to echo that. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Barry, or sorry, Councilor O'Connell,
Yeah.
I think they.
I have a name, Richie. Pretty soon I won't have a title either.
Hyper formal today. Just been a long day.
Yeah.
So I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. We have to be empathetic to people and show it. I guess the question for the city is just to John Eric's point: is do you want to set the precedent?
Yeah.
If we set the precedent and keep on doing this, there is no scaling back. And I completely agree with you. I mean, we're talking about people who are losing. I mean, those houses definitely sold for well over $500,000 a piece when it was probably all said and done.
Yeah. So
you're talking about a major source of income that's just lost. But I don't know. I guess when you were just alluding to a number of different options for people to consider. I guess my question: what are really the options for them right now? I'm trying to figure out what we've actually presented to them in terms of a course or an approach. Have we given them essentially saying, hey, you may be able to, one thing for us to consider, for instance, is a special assessment throughout the island.
Yeah.
Right. And talk about how we do it. I'm trying to wonder, like, what has been presented to just people out there in terms of their options?
Well, a bunch of them have contacted Julia and are looking into FEMA buyouts.
Yeah.
And just as an FYI, Rishi, one of the least expensive houses there is $855,000, and the other ones are $1 million or more, right on Reservation Terrace.
Yeah. But again, to answer Rishi's question, it's a good question. We're working through the options list at this point, and as the mayor obviously is well aware of it, and the councilors. We're just trying to present a kind of a smorgasbord of options as we perceive them, and when they pursue a particular course, if there is a way to support them, I think that there's a general sense, and I'm just reporting what I feel that the council and mayor, although I can't speak for her, but I think have a better sense of the council feels about it, is that we want to be supportive in whatever way we can. Now, the caveat, and you pointed it out correctly, is, we're just throwing $150,000 at it. Well, 6 or 8 years ago, I voted for a $30,000 appropriation of sand, and it was washed away in about 10 days.
Right.
And I said at the time, I will never do that again. So call me a liar. I will vote to eat this appropriation. However, it's with our eyes wider open and with some more options potentially being considered both by the city and by the residents. And I can't predict where it's going to go.
Yeah,
and I think that's a role that this committee can play in terms of looking at those options and setting expectations going forward.
Jane, if I might interrupt that in part, I think the most productive thing that could come through this committee is knowing the resources, and I have great respect for the expertise and the resources that this committee has available. If we could make like a laundry list of options and reasonable paths for people to pursue if they choose one of them or another. Because when you're in a situation like many of them are, the potential path to a reasonable outcome might seem so intimidating that they freeze and don't act on the possibilities that may exist. And I think we should try to be, we should try to assist them with perhaps with some technical assistance and maybe a subcommittee, exploring those options. I really think that there are some options. They're not great, but there's some good ones and there's some really bad ones. But we ought to at least help, give them a roadmap that they could pursue and have some hope of a reasonably good outcome.
I think that's a great idea. We should probably get to work on that if we are going to do it.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just, I would certainly participate in that. Barry, it sounds like you would. Rishi?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
I know you're short on time, but.
Yeah, I can help with it. I mean, again, I mean, to Barry's point, and the reason why I'm rubbing my head, I've been in a number of these conversations today, is that there are really no, I mean, all the options are going to be compromises.
I know. And I'm thinking, and I apologize, but in terms of time today, I don't think we can get too much into those options, but I want to make sure that we continue this topic and discussion soon. So maybe I'll contact everyone, see who wants to be involved and try to turn something around fairly quickly. Does that sound okay? It's not satisfying whatsoever right now, but is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds.
The one thing.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Real quick, just real quick. What if everyone in the group just blast an email to Jane or the whole group?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, these are my ideas off the top of my head, because at least you can compile them and then form that task force, Jane.
All right, I love it. Please do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest too. Just have everyone brainstorm, write it down, and we'll refine.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Did Brett try to get in and we shut him down? Or
yes. Yeah, that's all right.
I'm sorry, Brett.
In. Well, I just had a question, and it's perhaps naive of me. So people more familiar with city government, but you know, I hear the thoughts about trying to, you know, do what we can to protect people out there. But while there's a consideration of that, is there a risk that there could be a proposition put on a ballot once people find out in general that there's this money going into protection, to say, hey, city, you can't do this, and vote for that? You know, something like marijuana stores was there, et cetera. I mean, people find out the $150,000 a month is going to these homes. And I'm not against it. I'm just saying that there may be some time constraint here if somebody came up with that you don't have 2 or 3 years to do this.
Having run ballot questions before, if I might respond, Jane, it's a long process, and it has to coincide with the regular election cycle. So right. You know, at the very least, we're a year away from anything of that nature.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah, it's something to put on the table, I guess. But that's kind of a nuclear option, and it's a coarse instrument. It's a blunt instrument.
Right. But it could be done by a group of people.
Yeah.
Not this group, but anybody in the city, right?
Yeah, anybody could do it. Yeah.
Right. But the city council and or the mayor can just say we're not spending any more money either.
Right. That's true.
Okay. Get me your ideas and we'll go from there. That would be great. Thank you. Hazardous mitigation plans up next for the updates. There's not too much. There's slowed down for a bit. There's another meeting, I think next week or last week in November, to get that final draft. I think we've talked about it enough in the past that we all are familiar with that plan and the need for it. So unless anyone has any other questions, comments on that, we'll move on. All right. Committee updates. Sarah, Brett, could you give us a quick overview of where you are on those things?
I'll jump. I think Sarah had delegated this to me yesterday, but Sarah, feel free to drop in. So this is not quite as dire a subject as the previous one here, but just let me update what we're doing on the website. So the group that's been working on this has collected a large number of requirements, and you know, we met a couple of weeks ago, got them together, and it's many things. You know, I wouldn't even begin to go through them here. The other thing that we decided on was to try to put a prototype together, because it would give us you know, something concrete to show to the city council or the mayor, whoever, and say, this is where we're heading, this is what we want to do. In my experience of developing software, people always know what they don't want. When you show it to them, they say, I don't want that. So it's a good tool to help hone your objectives. And to that end, towards the prototype, we kind of settled on looking at some free software. There's a based on Drupal, which is free, which the city, I think, uses as part of its website, but this would be a separate site put together. And a set of Drupal compatible with WordPress and some other stuff called Civi CRM. And this is customer relationship management software, which is one of the objectives of this site, which is not only to provide information but to get people attracted to that site and get the list of people and stay in touch. So we're going to try to put those two pieces together and run it on a small server as a prototype and hopefully get something up and running over the next few months. And then when that's there, then we can go forward. But if this proves to be worthwhile and hits our objectives, then the cost of doing this would be, minimal, $40 to $50 a month for running the server, perhaps. So that's where we're at, and I'll turn it back to Jane unless there's any questions.
Do you have any examples that you could email us links for?
Yeah, sure, I can. I can there's a number of Civi CRM, which is this open source software, has 11,000 sites. I can send some out. I have them. Maybe I'll put them in the chat here after I won't be able to do that and talk at the same time, but I'll put a couple here.
No, that's fine. And just one more, Jane, real quick. Are you talking about like, video,
yeah,
pictures? I mean, our master planning, our mission statement, everything we're doing. Like, is this an all-encompassing everything NRC?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the list of items that we have is huge, and I'm sure it's going to have to be whittled down between, first this group and then the committee to see what we want. The idea is that to get something that would be a model for it up and running quickly, so we get feedback and be able to change. The way it's being done, it shouldn't be difficult to change the content.
But I think we talked about sending out the document that has the requirements and the results of sort of the brainstorming on content, and people could add that.
Well, it's on the ResCom site, right? So it's just that link.
Yeah, Brett, if you could send that link for what we've come up with for content, and also a few examples that you've looked at that you think we might go in that direction, that would be fantastic.
I can do that.
Thank you. Sarah, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I won't go into any detail, but just to throw the idea out there that we talked about at the subcommittee meeting, I've been thinking we should propose a series of presentations sponsored by the NRC, by the Resiliency Committee, thinking quarterly timeframe, starting with the one that that was highlighted in various discussions in the past, which is to update the overview presentation that was done last February. So we have it ready for the new incoming city councilors and mayor. So a public presentation of that could be the first one early next year. We've had on the docket at Storm Surge a proposal from Gordy to do an update on the wastewater treatment infrastructure, resiliency, and the Clipper City Rail Trail improvements. So that could be one. John Eric, you could do one on updates to the water supply. So sort of along the same lines as what we did, sponsored as Storm Surge last year, but do it under the guise of the NRC, so that you can hopefully get a different and a broader audience. And also meet the objectives of education and communication. So just get a heartbeat going in terms of these presentations and come up with the topics, and not doing too frequently, but just have it a regular forum. So I can flesh that out as a formal proposal, but just to throw it out there as an idea to get some feedback.
Yeah, I especially like that first one, and if we could do it as early as we could next year, and for educating new council members, new mayoral team. It would be fantastic to get everyone in the same room, not as a deliberation, of course, but just as this is what the plan is, and this is where we see it going in terms of implementation. And with public there as well. I think it's great, Sarah. Does anyone else have input?
I guess we don't have chat, right? So I'll send out a separate email.
Yeah, if you could send it via email, I think that'd be great.
All right.
Thank you. All right, good. It's so hard to read the room in Zoom. Andy, can you give just a couple of minute update on where we are in the regs working group?
Yeah, so just as a reminder, we had some discussion about adding resiliency techniques into the site plan standards. There's two areas that we had talked about. I had talked with the planning board earlier this year about updating the site plan standards. This is basic stuff about how parking lots are designed. For instance, how many trees are planted to provide shade and uptake and whatnot, cooling effect and things like that. So there are different improvements like that we can make to our standards, including low impact development techniques, rain gardens and that sort of thing for stormwater management. So we're working to put together the specific bullet list that would be added to the site plan standards. So these typically affect large commercial projects or large multifamily projects, the way that the zoning ordinance works. So this is not to affect small scale projects or homes, but rather the commercial projects, things that might be, say, downtown or Story Avenue or the business park. Certainly there's going to have to be discussion in future years or decades or centuries about other areas to regulate. But what we're trying to do is the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, of things that seem like common sense, right? Plant a few more trees in parking areas to make sure that they're well landscaped, and that seems like a no-brainer, right? We did have some conversation about the sea level rise as a resiliency issue and whether that should be addressed. I think all of us agreed, I don't want to speak for others, but certainly I felt that it was not realistic to assume that that's an issue that could be taken up in the near term. And I think some of the comments you heard tonight, today and, in other formats, it's a very sensitive issue. There's not enough information out there for folks, I think, or for counselors or the incoming mayor or others to make a determination on issues like that. There's current erosion issues that clearly need to be addressed right now. And there's a lot of education that needs to be done on what essentially scientists are saying is going to happen to the rest of the island, not just the hotspot where we're seeing erosion today. And that's the part that should be concerning as a land use issue is how do we protect the homes, the infrastructure, whether it's public property and access on the beach, and in particular, like I said earlier, the roadway. If we don't have primary access to the island, that's maybe the first place to start. So those are things we need to look at in the future. But the idea here is just to have some standards that will help to make sure that folks who are coming in with larger projects, commercial, mixed use, or multifamily, that they're trying to be as energy efficient as possible. So different resiliency techniques in site plan review, and also as to the building structures themselves, trying to show, similar to an ordinance or two ordinances that were adopted by the city council recently, trying to show where applicants are doing their best to either be net zero or produce solar energy on site, pull from the grid, for instance, as opposed to fossil fuel usage, to basically have standards in there where the planning board is looking at those criteria in the review of a project, not just the typical site plan standards or standards that they'd be looking at, in a lot of ordinances to date. A lot of communities are adding these things in now because they're a new issue that needs to be addressed or a better understood issue. So our plan is to incorporate some of those into standards. Those will be considered. I think there'll be a circling back. Rick and I will circle back with you folks and with Jane and Julie on these things. And then we'll also circle back with the planning board. I think the assumption there is that if there's a reasonable agreement on those standards, that those will be brought forward to the council for consideration in a amendment to the site plan standards of the ordinance.
Thanks. And Rick Tainer, who's also with us right now, has been or is working with us on that as well. He's on the planning board. So it's a nice conduit. So looking at low hanging fruit, as Andy said, and at this point, not proposing standards or guidelines addressing flood resiliency, but we have talked about putting together a questionnaire that asks questions about where they are on whatever designated floodplain that we're talking about, linking that maybe to a map with new different floodplain levels, and just asking questions. So really getting that conversation started and making sure that people are aware that we're looking at the issue. But right now, really in terms of standards or guidelines, looking like stormwater management, tree canopy, parking lot landscaping, those things that are admittedly easier to attack.
So what's this group's plan to implement zoning changes? I mean, I just heard Andy say that it's going to take a long time. It's not, and we know that we went back and forth on those emails about even if we did 100 feet in, no build out, or unless you're 6 feet higher, and there's no bandwidth for that getting passed through city council. As far as this group in the regulation subcommittee, Andy, you just said that there's not enough information. What are you exactly talking about?
Yeah, John Eric, I don't mean in terms of the scientist review of the information or what we saw from the Horsley-Witten presentation or even maps that you've prepared showing future sea level rise. It's the fact that the average person does not have a good understanding of that information. So for instance, the resiliency brochure, if I'm not mistaken, still hasn't gone out to folks. So, we have not yet gotten people to understand that issue well enough to be able to make decisions about whether or not there should be any regulatory change like the one you're talking about. There's a lot of properties that would be affected on Plum Island alone by such regulations. So I think, we saw something earlier this year in discussion amongst the council over something similar, even though that proposal, as I understood it, was basically to limit the footprint of building expansions, not to prevent anybody from rebuilding or, raising houses out of flood zones. That is even itself a sensitive area. And so to me, it does not seem that there is enough information and enough understanding from the general populace to discuss an issue like that as a regulatory change. I think we're well in advance of that. And I think that's what we saw, earlier this year. What we're talking about now is things that we do think are manageable and doable. But there needs to be more education of folks, you're an engineer, you're a scientist, but for other people to understand that. And one of the ways that, like I think Molly said a second ago, is we're talking about having another map layer added to the MyMap pages or the GIS page on the city's website. That would allow people to actually see similar to what you could see on a very large scale zoomed out from the Horsley-Witten study, which is basically where is projected future flood level, sea level rise and storm surge expected to be, and to allow people to basically zoom in and out and get a better feeling for that and a better understanding about it. I don't think that necessarily that the science is going to change. There is an issue, according to all projections, that we're going to have to deal with for the island, whether it's access to the island or further erosion from more spots than just the hot spot today. But I don't think there's enough information out there for the general populace to feel comfortable and understand those issues, or for councilors to take a vote on something that has that much widespread reach.
Yeah, so exactly. So the way I'm looking at it is, okay, let's address those things that we feel like we could have some success very, soon, get those done. And at the same time, we have our communication, education, and effort. And so we're definitely not dropping those more difficult issues with SLR, flood resiliency, but we really I think we have a lot of work to do before we go ahead and try to propose changes for that. And doesn't mean it's going to be many, many years out, because I don't think we have time, but I think we have some work to do before we do that, because we want to be successful.
So the only thing I want to add, he keeps talking about Horsley-Witten. Horsley just keeps grabbing stuff from like Boston. And I just got the coastal flood inundation model from Woods Hole. I just got it yesterday, all the data layers. Mass DOT hired them to do the coastal flooding along the Massachusetts coast to predict future 2030, 2070, and 2100 inundation models. So that's more of the horse's mouth than what anyone probably has, because they just finished it and it was for the whole state. And I was going to ask this group if you felt that we should put that on our website. I was going to talk to MVPC if they're going to, if they've already been approached on putting that on their, other communities on the North Shore, their website. What do you guys think about that? I know that I just threw a lot at you, but the Mass DOT hired them to do future flood modeling with the latest technology, and they finished it.
Yeah, John, Eric, I want to second that real quickly because I can tell you right now the Horsley Wind stuff is not correct. So the Gulf of Maine from 2000 to now to 2030 is going to see, and we're in the Gulf of Maine, is going to see because of the way that the gravitational pull works and the way that the water is actually rising, we're going to see higher sea level rise relative to almost anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to recognize that. So we're talking from 2000 to 2030, at least 17 inches. And the Horsley wind models don't have that accounted for correct right now. So
yeah.
The Woods Hole stuff is great. I'm working with Bigelow Labs right now, and they're actually referring to the Woods Hole stuff as well. So they're both Oceanic Graphics Institutes. I know Scripps is actually producing their own right now as well. But I think that's just to coastal California. But I think they're actually trying to do a global model also looking at this because they're trying to predict it relative. There's all this weird stuff happening with the jet stream and so on. So the Woods Hole models, if I could advocate for anything, is what we should actually be posting. I know we paid all this money and everything else to do that, but to your point, they're really pulling data from other sources. And I'm not trying to fault them that they're using the best information that they possibly use. But the Woods Hole stuff is going to be way more accurate than anything else that's out there right now.
Thanks for bringing that up because, adding to it because when I look at the state hiring a firm, to me that's more of the, that's the basis that the whole state is going to be using. The CZM is going to use it, DEP, and so on and so forth. So I think it's going to eventually make it to the formal flood inundation model for state agencies.
So John, Eric, you said you're talking to MVPC to see where they are in terms of putting those up on their website or using those maps.
I gave it like 30 seconds of thought yesterday. I'm like, hey, I wonder if those guys would do that. Woods Hole provided to us. I'm going to give them a call because they gave me a disclaimer of proprietary rights of what we can and can't do with this information. Mm-hmm. I suspect that because it's final, it's paid for by the state, that we as a community, not to make a profit off of it. I think they say, absolutely, you can put it on your website. I highly recommend that you put it on your GIS, and it's there for the people to refer to. My hunch is they'll say, absolutely, it's okay. MVPC would ask the same question, are we allowed by rights to do that? And they'll find out. I think Woods Hole will give them the right. So I think it's okay. I'm just trying to figure out, I got to give them a call and make sure it's legally okay.
Okay. Can you let us know the outcome of that? And then I would say on our website, a new one that we're developing, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I don't know about the current city's website and how that would work, but.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, what, Jane, just, I don't know how much you know and don't know, but essentially.
I don't either.
Oh no, yeah. Okay, that's cool. So when you go onto MyMap, you go onto MyMap has the GIS data layers.
Yeah.
That's managed by MVPC. So when MVPC puts it on, they can put it on just our website or all of them.
Okay, I got you now.
Yep, but even just with ours, what this means is that when you call up the MyMap, everyone has access to the MyMap. That's where you'll see it.
Okay, I got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, let us know, would you?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, and anyone that is really technically into this stuff, I waited, and I owe you guys an update on this because I told you I was going to do it a year ago. I reached out to Woods Hole to find out when their model would be complete for the combination inland and coastal flood model analysis. And Kirk told me that, and he's going to fine tune his answer. He's going to get back to me. But for our area, the coast wins. The storm from the coast beats any inland flood elevation strictly by definition of Mother Nature. It's the coast. How far up the Merrimack River will the inland rainfall event be stronger than the coast? is something I'm working with Woods Hole on to find out where that delineation is. But somewhere between our, somewhere between the Whittier Bridge and Lawrence is going to be an area where everything upstream of that, the inland model is the dominant model, the dominant flood elevations. I know that's a very technical thing for you guys. I'm not trying to say you're unable to understand it, but there's always a murky area between doing the two combined models. And Woods Hole has been waiting for Mass DOT to give them information to do the Woods Hole, to do the combined model. And Mass DOT is delayed 2 years, and Woods Hole is ready to do it for free on their own dime, so that the whole world can use the combination of the Merrimack River and the coast combined model, so that all of us communities on the Merrimack River will get a better model. That's the update that is probably another 6 to 12 months away again. So it's always getting pushed off.
All right, thank you. That's interesting. Okay. Okay to move on. I wanted to bring us back to a little bit about our projects list. And I know it's already 4 o'clock and I was hoping to wrap this up, but please have patience, 10, 15 more minutes. Hopefully we can get through it. But I did want to circle back. I know we touched on a project list in the CIP last meeting, but I've given it more thought, and I really feel like one of the best ways to ensure continuity with these issues, and we're in a time of a lot of change, is through the budgeting process. And so we're looking at the project lists or the action items on the plan and cross-checking that with the CIP. And I just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. And if we are getting those projects on the CIP and whatever process that is, I think is fairly important. And so something just to make sure that they're not dropped, or to try to prevent any delay in the future. And so what I'm doing, let's see, I don't think it's a long list, but I've looked at the CIP, I've looked at the lit, I think we can narrow it down to 2, 3, or 4, in terms of right now, to make sure that we are prioritizing the right projects. And I'm talking about the Artichoke Reservoir Dam, that is on the CIP, but I'm not so sure about, say, flooding Market Square or looking at the swales in the business park. And so that's something, I know we're short on time, it's already middle of November, but I would like some help in terms of looking at those lists. I don't think it's going to take a lot of time, but just to get organized around it, to make sure that we really are prioritizing ourselves and not losing out on an opportunity to ensure some kind of continuity going forward in the next year or two. So just throwing that out there, talking to department heads. Barry, maybe you can be helpful with this as well.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted at the moment with a message that I'm responding to.
That's okay.
I'll have to admit, I'm trying to multitask and not succeeding.
And so that's where I'm at in thinking about how to prioritize.
All right, I'm focused again.
That's okay. Yeah, I saw you looking down, so I thought I'd say what happened.
Something popped, yeah.
So I'm talking about prioritizing, I'm talking about infrastructure here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be circling back with the group to try to get, after I'm done cross-referencing, if anything's missing on the current CIP, to try to get it on there.
Do you want to summarize our conversation for the committee?
I basically just did.
Yeah, all right. That's just one counselor's crystal ball making, there is a process, but it's not a formalized, it's not dictated by statute or regulation, but the process is generally pretty straightforward. And the first things we have to do is get our items prioritized, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever they're going to be in terms of expenditures, and get them placed on the CIP. again, I was distracted, so I don't know if you shared this with them, but the CIP is a good planning document. And 10, 15 years ago, we didn't really use it. It was just a grant requirement. And we established it to meet a grant requirement and continued with it, which is a good planning practice. But it is used, however, to kill things if they're not on the CIP, even if there are good things and necessary things. So why run that risk? It's silly. We should try to plan the city's expenditures in a rational manner. And I think to the extent that we can, we ought to start putting dollar figures to their, maybe it's the back of an envelope, but at least it's a start. And John Eric might help with that, and maybe Rishi help do that. For some of the bricks and mortar stuff, for lack of a better word, that's going to be required over the next several years. Not only do we want to flag the items, but the magnitude of the expenditure required to install stuff. That's a critical component. We ought to be clear-headed about that. There are a lot of demands on the city's purse. And every mayor, whether it's an existing mayor or a new mayor coming in the door, has to establish priorities based on what's on those lists. So
Barry, can I ask a question? So
yeah.
One of the things I've been struggling to understand is the items that were on the CIP last year that had been targeted for having an expenditure this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they tracked, and how do you get a status update to say, was that money spent and
how much of it?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. The best person to speak to is the finance director, Ethan Manning. If for no other reason that he tracks it like a demon. He's really knowledgeable, and he'll also give you an instantaneous answer because it's always in the top of his head, so you won't have to farble around waiting for a reply. So that's where I'd go. Are there particular items that you'd like to? Maybe I know some that you want to respond to right now.
Not live, but we did pull out, and I think that's what Jane's talking about. We did pull out the ones from last year that tied back to the plan, and so it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, at the end of the fiscal year, here's the status on each of those.
Yeah, well, there are a bunch of them, and sometimes the order in which we do them is affected by what we see coming down the pike from the state, down the pipe from the state or federal governments.
Yep.
So, the big ticket items that we thought we would get to this year are Phillips Drive, which we are getting to, but we're kind of finishing all the planning first because that infrastructure money is ideal for that particular project. We're going to go forward, but see if we can kind of, reallocate some money so that, we make maximum use of the federal funds. And the other that is in the front of people's minds is the fire station. And it's possible that the city council will kick that off. And that's a $7 to $8 million project right now. And I would be surprised if it didn't inflate up to about 10 before we're done. That's the fire station in the West End that needs to be replaced.
But those are, but in terms, we did have Sarah went through and pulled out a list of resiliency related projects. So what I think I'll do.
There are, the ones that are resiliency related, this is the bulkhead, is coming up real soon. And I don't know if Andy's still on the meeting or not. I don't think so. He could comment on that.
The bulkhead project is definitely a key priority for us in terms of critical infrastructure. But, as the councilor said, there's lots of other things that, we have to work into the capital improvement plan and recognizing all the other capital needs the city has. And there's only so much money to go so many places.
And the Central Waterfront Park is pretty high on that list, but it doesn't have as steep a price tag as either the Phillips Drive reconstruction or the fire station.
So what I think I'll do, I definitely need to have that, and Andy had recommended as well to reach out to talk to Ethan Manning about the status of the funding of those projects. But I think I'll just reach out to you individually to hear, just to touch base on the projects in the works and what may or may not go on or should go on to the CIP, and then we'll come up with a recommendation pretty quickly. So you'll be hearing from me in a few days in terms of that, I think, just to get that ball rolling.
Sooner is always better than later. Yeah, you're right.
All right. And lastly, I wanted to talk about, and we've been putting this off and off, is the structure of these meetings, because I want to make sure that they're helpful. And it's an interesting group because there's us volunteers that a lot of us are very new to this, and we need to get as much background information and how the city operates as we can. And so I think in terms of being helpful, these meetings are just helping us get up to speed, never mind anything else right now, because we are fairly new and we've just started this implementation focus. And then the staff, I'm interested to know what can be most helpful for you as well. And you're reporting out a lot, which I really appreciate, and I think we all really appreciate. I have a feeling that depending on the staff members, you all probably have heard a lot of the updates, just in your everyday work lives, and us volunteers haven't. And so, it's useful. Those updates are very useful for one part, some of us, maybe not so much for others. And they take up a lot of time. Today, we talked a lot about Plum Island, which was really necessary. But I'm trying to figure out, and I'd like feedback on what will you find most helpful out of these monthly meetings? What you would like to see, what you need from me, anything like that. And also I would like to propose, because we had talked about having quarterly meetings and maybe working on topic-based monthly, and now that I, further into it, I'm not sure that would work. But what I would love to do is get to know department heads, especially those with working on resiliency related work in general. And so I'm thinking, maybe have Lisa Reed from the Parks Department come in and talk, meet us 1 month, or director of DPS come in and meet us 1 month, and a two-way conversation just to kind of get to know us, get to know what we're all about, and finding a little bit more about their work and how we might be able to inform that work. And so I've just thrown a ton at you. We don't need to decide today, but that's where I'm thinking. So feel free to respond now, or if you want to respond in writing.
Well, I think you raised good points, Jane. And I think monthly meetings are definitely necessary for the whole group. And you can invite speakers, sort of like Sarah was talking about, but that was more for public, but for the committee, and that could be department heads, or it could be experts that come in. It's easy to find experts to come in and talk to the group that can give us more information than we already have. And then continue with the subcommittee meetings. I mean, I think it's really effective to have the small committees like the education. That's the committee I'm on. That's been really effective. And I think we're moving ahead well. It sounds like the regulation committee is doing the same. So I think that structure works. And then I think bringing in department heads is a great idea. Hearing from DPS director and parks director, and obviously we're going to have to hear from the new mayor, and others that, it's great that John, Eric, and Andy are integral to this because they're vital to it. But anyone else that they suggest would be good as well.
I'd like to second
and city council too. I mean, Barry, there'll be a new council starting.
Yeah.
Is it just going to be Ward 1 and 2 that come in, or are we going to have someone from public utilities? Which committee? Maybe that person, that counselor from public utilities, should be on the resiliency committee or come to every single meeting to be that conduit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be a good suggestion, but we ought to give them time to organize themselves and pick that up in January.
Yeah, good idea.
I think that's a great idea, you guys, because right now I'm the bad guy going to these meetings with the Water Commission, and they really need to hear from you. We just had a real heated discussion an hour ago, and right now I'm late for a Water Commission meeting, which is fine. But my point is, I'm going to go back to that heated discussion. This is just human nature. There's a lot of people that still aren't entrenched like we are, you guys. They just are not entrenched like we are. So they just don't understand where I'm coming from. And for instance, I said, hey, we got a plan for a drought. They go, well, I was told by our consultant that our water supply is good for 20 years. What do I say about that, guys?
Yeah.
Woody,
Your consultant's wrong.
Ty and Bond just finished a watershed management report, and the outcome that they heard was that we're good for 20 years. No. In the chapter that has drought, the city needs to plan for drought. Consultants can't tell you how to, we have a lot of work to bring these people in. The more they hear, then there's less public PR that you guys have to do, that we all have to do. We don't have to turn to a formal subcommittee of PR, have them come here, and that's the PR. I think, Molly, you hit it right in the head. Jane, you hit it right in the head. Every month, just bring someone new in and pound everything that we're talking about. The more they hear it, the more they will accept it. Don't you agree, Barry? Like for the city council, the more you hear it, the more you accept it. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, to some degree. We had a political assessment when I worked in the State House years ago. If you get one call, you've got a constituent. If you've got 5 calls on an issue, then you've got an issue that you have to deal with. And if you get 10 calls or more, it's a movement. Get the hell out of the way. So I do believe, and I think this is what you're saying, that squeaky wheels get attention. And we do have to have, however we do it, stimulate more conversation about the impacts of resiliency in other parts of government and other parts of the community, such as the water and sewer commissions, such as the Parks Department. You know, a lot of their activity is near the waterfront. The youth services planning has to kind of circle around and look at what's conceivable as they move forward. There are just a whole range of things that need to incorporate resiliency into their deliberations. So I think that's what you're saying, isn't it, John?
That's all I'm saying is the more we bring them in and do that form of education, we don't have to have a formal public meeting on some other night. We just do it through here and just bring them in, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yep, I totally agree.
Great.
But Jane, may I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
And neither John, Eric, nor Molly would say this, nor Andy, because they're committed and they get it. But we should be very mindful of the time commitments of the city employees and be respectful of the other things that they do with their lives, other than meet with a committee like this. And give them the opportunity to say no and accept it, because I'm buried right now. I can't do it. I've got 6 or 7 other things in front of me before I can come back and respond to the Resiliency Committee. They're helping us here. Yeah, they're working, but this is distracting them from other things that are equally important in their work lives.
Well, that's nice for you to say, Barry, but this is the same is true for all these volunteers.
Oh yeah, I'm not discounting that.
Yeah, I know you're not.
I have a vested interest in the functioning of the city government, and that's what I say.
Right, and that's another point about Plum Island. I mean, we just spent 3/4 of the meeting talking about Plum Island.
Yeah.
And if you ask the mayor what was the hardest part of her job over the last 12 years, she'll say Plum Island. So people need to understand that too.
Yeah,
we can't spend all of our time just on Plum Island.
Actually, she might say city council. Dealing with us is a pain in the ass.
She might. I don't know. On a good day, she'll say Plum Island, I guess. But anyway, yeah, and people need to understand that too, that we can't spend all of our time on Plum Island. It has to be spread across the city. But thank you for saying that.
Yeah, duly noted, Barry. Any other thoughts in terms of what folks would find most helpful from these meetings?
Maybe just add some deadlines for whatever the subcommittees are doing, Jane. Mm-hmm. Instead of keeping it open-ended, saying, hey, we're really pushing for this rollout on mid-January, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, and we are doing that internally, just we haven't talked about it. So.
Yep, understood.
All righty. Sounds good. I did send out an email last minute. It was something John Eric had sent to me on the Northeast. Now I'm forgetting what it is, but they're asking for a partnership, letters of support. It's out of UMass Amherst. If you could check your email on that. I think it makes sense for us to send a letter of support and probably become partner. So if you can just respond back to me on that, that'd be great. Because I'm assuming you all haven't had a chance to look at it. I just sent it out this afternoon.
That's the same one the mayor sent this morning, whenever she sent it saying I might not be able to make the meeting. It's the same one.
It's the same group that did that, the survey and the
same group.
Okay. Good. Anything last minute?
Nope. Thank you very much, Jane, for organizing everybody.
Yep. Agreed.
Keeping us on task and keeping the conversation going.
Good work, guys.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everyone.